What if the part of you trying to succeed was the very part that was built to lose? Not because it's weak, but because it was designed for a different game, one that no longer exists. To win now, you don't upgrade that self. You erase it and rebuild from nothing. Stay with this, because what you think is you was never yours to begin with. You tell yourself you're evolving, that every book you read, every breakdown you survive, every small act of discipline is proof you're getting stronger. But if you're honest, truly honest, you'll see you haven't changed. Not in the way that matters. What you've done is refine the mask. You've sanded down the edges of the same identity and called it growth. Because real change, the kind that ruptures identity and rebuilds instinct, requires sacrifice. Not effort, not repetition, not self-help. Sacrifice. But instead of sacrifice, you've chosen preservation. You've decided to hold on to the parts of yourself that feel the most familiar, the ones that keep you safe, the ones that have earned approval, pity, belonging. And you protect those parts like they're sacred. They're not. They're strategies. They were built when you were small, when being accepted mattered more than being capable, when being moral mattered more than being effective, when all you wanted was to be enough for people who were barely enough for themselves. And now, even when you talk about ambition, discipline, power, you're still carrying the architecture of a self built for survival, a self that was trained to avoid rejection, not command respect, a self that was told, stay soft, stay kind, stay the same. And you believed that was strength, but it's not strength. It's obedience to a narrative that no longer serves you. What you're defending isn't your soul. It's a script written by fear, directed by insecurity, edited by every authority figure who benefited from your submission. And now that same script is running in the background while you talk about goals, while you visualize outcomes, while you fantasize about a future the current version of you could never survive in. Because that's the part you refuse to admit. You cannot take this version of yourself into the next level. It wasn't built for that environment. It wasn't built for high-stakes negotiation, for strategic ruthlessness, for environments where clarity matters more than character. It was built for safety. And safety is the enemy of transformation. You call it authenticity, this insistence on staying true to your patterns. But authenticity has become your armor, a way to avoid the demolition required to become something useful. Because that's what this is, demolition. Not growth, not healing, not affirmation, demolition. And until you admit that, you will spend your life upgrading a house that was never meant to survive a storm. You'll call it progress, but it's ornament. You'll call it growth, but it's repetition. You'll keep reinforcing the walls of your comfort, hoping that one day they'll transform into power. They won't. There's nothing left to preserve, only something left to become. And that becoming doesn't start with addition. It starts with destruction. Destruction has a reputation problem. People hear the word and imagine chaos, wreckage, loss. They imagine the crumbling of something precious. But demolition isn't rage. It's design. It's the decision to remove what no longer holds. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He didn't glorify destruction for its own sake. He wasn't advocating madness. He was advocating clarity, precision, results. He knew that certain structures, whether political or psychological, could not be reasoned with. They had to be removed entirely. Because anything built on weak foundations will fail under real pressure. So ask yourself, what are you still trying to build on top of? Old values that comfort you but no longer serve you. Dreams inherited from people who settled. Morality codes you never chose. A self-image that's only alive because you're afraid of what comes next. You can't build strength on top of sentiment. You can't construct dominance on the foundation of needing to be liked. You can't rule while protecting the identity that was designed to follow. This is what makes transformation brutal, not because it's cruel, but because it requires accuracy. You don't get to keep what doesn't work just because it feels good. You don't get to carry old instincts into new arenas and expect them to hold. You have to clear the ground, not symbolically, practically, psychologically, and yes, emotionally. Because part of you still thinks you can keep some pieces, that if you hold on to just enough of the old you, the world will still recognize you, still reward you, still love you. But that's not how power works. Power doesn't care about continuity. It cares about outcome. So the part of you that's asking, "Can I change without losing myself?" is asking the wrong question. The right question is, which part of me has to die so something stronger can live? And when you finally ask it, the answer will come fast. You already know what needs to go. You just haven't given yourself permission to let it burn. But here's the truth. Nothing real can be built until you do. And that's why most people never rise. Not because they're weak, but because they refuse to tear down what's familiar. They want to transform, but without loss. They want to evolve, but without grief. They want to win, but without change. But change doesn't begin with vision boards and affirmations. It begins with ruin, intentional ruin, the kind that clears space. You are not broken for needing to destroy. You are broken when you refuse to, because the real danger is not in the fire. It's in the preservation of structures that were never built to take you anywhere new. You think you're being careful, but you're being delayed. And every second you hesitate to demolish the outdated, you prolong your own irrelevance. So begin. Not with inspiration, with destruction. Most people treat identity like essence, like it's who they are. But identity isn't essence. It's architecture, a structure, a frame, a system of thought built over time. And like any structure, it can be torn down, rewired, replaced. But you won't see that until you stop thinking of yourself as a fixed person and start recognizing what you are. A pattern, a set of defaults installed by repetition and reinforcement. The things you believe, the things you avoid, the way you react when you're doubted, those aren't traits, they're programming. And programming doesn't care if it serves you. It just runs. This is what keeps people trapped in loops. Not weakness, not laziness, infrastructure. Systems inside the self that are so familiar they go unquestioned. You act them out before you even know you've made a choice. The worst part? Most of this internal structure wasn't built by you. It was assembled by teachers, parents, culture, trauma, religion, media. Piece by piece, belief by belief, until it started to feel like you. But it's not you. It's what was installed in your absence. When you were too young to resist, too desperate to belong, too confused to question. And now, decades later, you still think your reactions are a personality. You think your hesitation is humility. You think your need to be accepted is just part of being human. It's not. It's code. And that code has a cost, because everything in your internal system is connected. If one belief is designed to keep you safe, another is designed to keep you small. If one value tells you to be kind, another tells you not to speak up. If one instinct pushes you to adapt, another pulls you back into predictability. So you stay stuck because every attempt to grow sets off an internal alarm. But this isn't your soul resisting, it's your structure rejecting change. This is why transformation feels so violent, because you're not just upgrading, you're replacing the system that told you who to be. And like any structure, identity doesn't dissolve politely. It must be removed, beam by beam, value by value, attachment by attachment. You don't find yourself by looking deeper into the same walls. You find yourself when you realize those walls were never yours. And once you do, the next step is obvious. You don't fix the house, you level it. Because every improvement you make to a broken identity keeps the core design alive, and the core design is the problem. Machiavelli would have seen it clearly. He would have told you what no therapist, no teacher, no friend ever dares to say. Who you are is not the point. What you're designed to do, that's the point. And if the current version of you is built to survive, not dominate, then you don't edit it. You replace it, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. You keep trying to evolve in a way that still feels familiar, still looks like you, still honors the expectations of who you've been. But real transformation doesn't make sense to your past self. It terrifies it. You want power without confrontation, change without grief, victory without sacrifice. So you aim for gradual shifts. You try to grow while preserving your self-image. But the truth is, if your evolution doesn't horrify the version of you that came before, you haven't gone far enough. Because the self you're protecting was not designed to rise. It was designed to cope, to maintain social coherence, to keep you predictable, relatable, and safe. That self doesn't want to be powerful. It wants to be seen. And as long as you want to be seen by the people who knew your old self, you will never become someone new. Machiavelli never wrote about kindness or purity or healing. He wrote about power. And power is not about being understood. It's about being effective. And effectiveness demands that you outgrow not just people, but the reflection they held of you. The part of you that hesitates, that asks, will they still accept me if I become this? Is still loyal to an identity you should have buried already. You're not asking for guidance. You're asking for permission. And the kind of man who wins doesn't wait for permission to become unrecognizable. You cannot be feared and familiar. You cannot be decisive and digestible. You cannot lead and still look like someone who was made to follow. And that's the crossroads. Either you keep defending who you were, or you become someone that version of you wouldn't even recognize. But becoming unrecognizable isn't betrayal. It's obedience to your future. Because your old self was built for the conditions of a different life, different ambitions, different fears. It did its job, and now it's in the way. The next version of you must have different instincts, not reactions. Instincts, the automatic will to dominate instead of delay, to silence weakness instead of accommodate it, to move with force even if no one claps. And here's the part you won't like. No one tells you when the old you is dead. You'll just wake up one day and realize you've become something sharper, colder, more exact. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped explaining. And that's the turning point. You don't need to look in the mirror and say, I still see myself. You need to look in the mirror and say, I've finally become something that version of me could never understand. That's not arrogance. That's escape. You keep searching for strategies, for tactics, for new routines to stack on top of the same broken structure. But the problem isn't the plan. It's the blueprint you're building from. A blueprint written before you had the clarity to question it, before you had the force to reject it. You inherited more than your fears. You inherited your ambitions, your values. Your entire emotional framework was downloaded from people who were barely surviving, and you called it truth. But it wasn't truth. It was containment, a design meant to keep you safe, silent, manageable. And now you're trying to use that same blueprint to build power, to build influence, to build a life that doesn't obey the rules you were given. It won't work. The blueprint says, be good, wait your turn, let people finish. Don't want too much. Don't move too fast. Don't make others uncomfortable. But power doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't apologize for ambition. It doesn't care if you make the room nervous. The world has been built by people who ignored the blueprint, who burned it and built something else. Something cold, something focused, something real. Machiavelli didn't believe in fairness. He believed in functionality. He understood that most people cling to virtue because it gives them a reason not to act. A moral framework is comforting, but comfort is the enemy of clarity. And clarity demands you ask one question. Who gave you this blueprint? Was it the school that punished you for standing out? The parent who only praised you for being easy? The friend group that celebrated your softness but disappeared when you had a spine? You didn't choose this identity. You were shaped into it, and now you're defending it because it feels familiar. But familiarity is not strength. It's repetition. It's a closed loop. And until you burn the blueprint, you will keep building new goals with old materials. Materials designed to fail under weight. So burn it. Burn the story that tells you humility will be enough. Burn the lesson that says waiting will earn you respect. Burn the structure that taught you to sacrifice ambition for acceptance. Because every time you hesitate, every time you compromise, every time you dull yourself down for the sake of being understood, you're not being wise. You're being obedient to a system you didn't choose. And the moment you realize that, the fire starts. You don't need more affirmations. You don't need another podcast. You need demolition. Rip up the floorboards, tear out the framing, burn the original design. Because until you do, every new version of yourself will still be held in place by the old foundation. You're not here to build on top. You're here to erase. You keep asking why it hasn't happened yet, why the work hasn't clicked, why the sacrifices haven't paid off, why you still feel like you're waiting for something to shift. But winning isn't waiting. It's not patience. It's not luck. It's construction. And construction only begins when the demolition is complete. Machiavelli didn't worship destruction. He understood it as necessity, a clearing process. Because you can't build a fortress on rotten soil. You can't construct power on top of self-doubt, moral confusion, and emotional noise. The ground must be leveled first, and then, deliberately, precisely, you build. You build a self that fits the demands of the world you want to shape. Not a version of you that survives it, a version that bends it. Because winning is not about who you are, it's about what you've engineered yourself to be. The world is full of people who mean well, who try hard, who stay loyal to their values and end up forgotten, not because they were unworthy, but because they never became structurally capable of impact. They refined themselves emotionally, but never restructured themselves strategically. They were moral, but ineffective. They were intelligent, but soft. They were disciplined, but designed to lose. You are not meant to repeat that pattern. If you've made it this far, you already know what the cost is. You've seen it. You've felt it. The slow death of the man you used to be, the guilt, the friction, the silence that follows after you stop explaining your change to people who still need you small. But here's what they don't understand. This wasn't transformation. It was construction, a deliberate, brutal redesign, rooted not in inspiration, but in function, in clarity, in war, because life is war, business is war, love, power, influence, they are all battles for control, and battles are not won by men who cling to their first shape. They're won by those who adapt, destroy, and build again. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in telling men how to feel. It was in showing them how to build a self that could hold power. And now, it's your turn. You've burned the blueprint. You've cleared the wreckage. There's no one left to ask for permission. No voice left to obey. No identity left to mourn. Only this question remains. What are you going to build now that nothing is in your way?